Among the many unknowns about COVID-19, what exactly are the risks to pregnant women? Are they more vulnerable to getting the virus? If infected, are they likely to experience more severe symptoms? And is there a threat of transmission to the fetus? Now, so far, studies suggest expectant mothers are not more vulnerable to severe symptoms than the general public. But with us to talk about it is Dr. Kavita Patel. She served as a senior aide to Valerie Jarrett in the Obama White House, advising on health reform, financial regulatory reform, and economic recovery issues. She's also a practicing primary care internist at Johns Hopkins and a non-resident fellow at the Brookings Institution. Kavita, thank you for joining me. Good to see you again. There are obviously all sorts of groups we're talking about who feel and may actually be more vulnerable than the general population because of coronavirus. What do we know about pregnant women?
Right. So as you mentioned, there is, first of all, Ali, there is not a lot of information just because this is, again, a novel virus. So what we do know, and a lot of it is kind of emerging as we're getting more and more data from all of the countries, starting with China, is that there's no greater risk for getting the virus. Now, a different question, though, is that if you are pregnant and you do get infected with COVID-19, then what does that mean for your baby, which I think is probably what every pregnant woman in the country is wondering. And we do know, again, very limited data, so it's hard to make generalizations. But we do know that for the cases, for example, 9 cases in China that have been incredibly kind of detailed in the Lancet journal, we do know that those women presented in their 3rd trimester, contracted the virus in their 3rd trimester, and all had a form of pneumonia that we think played some role in fetal distress, leading to C-sections, and ultimately kind of all the babies did fine, by the way,
right.
9 births, but ultimately led to kind of what we would call kind of complications
right.
in the delivery. So that's real.
Unlike the flu, where infants infants and children, young people who do not have well-developed immune systems tend to be more susceptible, that has so far not borne out in COVID-19.
Right. And this is kind of, you know, I hate to say, there's something that's always kind of interesting about these novel viruses, or if you want to call it the silver lining. In that sense, it's that children, not only infants, newborns, all the way up to at least age 14, have incredible kind of resilience and are just not getting infected. Having said that, again, there are children that have been infected. All of them, with the exception of 1 case, have all recovered fully. So we're trying to understand what is it about children that confers some sort of protection, again, mostly in their lungs and pulmonary system. What
would you recommend? Because, again, the one thing I'm not clear on, and I've been reporting on this for a month and probably for 2 weeks nonstop, at what point, particularly if you're pregnant, because you go through different ways in how you feel. At what point are you supposed to say to somebody when you're pregnant, I think I might have a problem here and I need to get checked out?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, trust me, I'm a mom, and there's no kind of time of more heightened anxiety than when you think something is wrong, and if you don't do something, you could harm your baby. So I fully recommend that you incredible low threshold to reach out to your OB's office. The American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, in literally almost daily, is kind of providing updates and guidance for obstetricians on what they should be doing. I think the next natural question is, when do you kind of need to worry about presenting to the office or kind of going to the doctor in person? And what do you do when you get to the doctor? And I think every one of your experts tonight have said it. You know, be sensible, use precautions. But if you're pregnant and something doesn't feel right, speak up early. But know, Ali, that we do not think that you're at higher risk for getting the virus. So it's really a matter of, do you think you actually have COVID-19, and should you be getting tested? And that's the question a lot of pregnant women will be asking.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.